So my first big job on the Tales from the Green Valley, which I found myself kind of doing whilst this storm was brewing on site, was to build a cattle shed. Now, of course, I like being outside. I'm pretty tidy with my hands, but I really didn't know where to start with this project. I had to essentially put all of the roof timbers up, and on my own as well, and collect most of the materials from the hillside, and finish this cattle shed essentially by the time that winter crept in November. Now, as far as the series is concerned, and I realise this is the rule rather than the exception with television productions, everything sort of went into meltdown in the first week. We ended up with a third choice director who turned out to be brilliant, actually. We had two presenters who really sort of struggled to get on in many ways, for lots of reasons. And I think one of the other things is we were very concerned about the sort of type of programme that we wanted to make. If you can remember sort of 2000, this is 2003, but around 2000 to 2003, there was a real flavour for reality television. And things like Castaway, hugely successful. Big Brother was born out of that as well. And I think television companies liked it because it was cheap to make, essentially. And I think commissioners liked it because it was seen as new and innovative. But of course the problem with it is reality television. It is cheap, essentially, because you can take a bunch of individuals, sort of wind them up, throw them in a room and watch the sparks fly and make television. And we felt very strongly that actually this isn't what we wanted to do. We didn't want to be perceived as modern people being dumped in this situation and essentially struggling. Could we survive the 17th century? Well, it's obvious that people survived the 17th century, otherwise we wouldn't be here today. So we felt that we wanted to place the emphasis more on what we were actually doing. I think we all had a genuine enthusiasm for what we did, and the sparks, they were flying all the time. We were constantly arguing, but not about each other. We were arguing really about what we were doing and how we were doing it and what our interpretation was. So it was a very vibrant atmosphere. And out of this project, I actually, because I knew I couldn't do this on my own physically and for health and safety reasons, so I contacted my friend Peter up in London at the time, and I said, look, Peter, I've got this gig on here. Can you come and help me build this barn? And we'd done quite a bit of experimental archaeology, so I knew he was reliable and hard-working. So Peter came down, and the director started filming us, and eventually out of that we got a more prominent role in the series. And we ended up making, all of the walls had been in place to start with, but we ended up putting basically everything else you see other than the walls together. Obviously we didn't make the ladder. But this was a fascinating introduction for me, really, and I think the kind of genesis of my interest in crafts really came from this experience. And the actual stepping back from this, having put those final, what they call the liggers on, having fixed the final, these external fastenings that we see along the thatch, having fixed those on, I stepped back and I felt an enormous sense of well-being and satisfaction. And I mean, I could go into the reasons why, but I think the point here to make is that, I really felt like I'd done something here. And whichever way, I would sort of walk around it for about the next week. I would literally just sort of walk around it at different angles, which is what I think you do when you create something that you think is beautiful. There was also a chance to learn a skill as well, and the other side, which you kind of photographed the side I thatched, I have to say the other side is far superior standard of thatch, because a master thatcher came along and taught me how to thatch. But he himself had never thatched in this style. This is a stubble thatch, where the crop is actually cut, the heads are cut off in the field. You've got a much taller cereal crop, the heads are cut off and taken away to be threshed. The stubble's left in the field, but it's then reaped in much the same way that you would reap hay, and it's bunched up. So you're actually thatching with something that's quite short as well, and you can see that. You've got the sort of butts out. But we also saw, actually, just go back to that previous slide, we also saw that it had a bracken base coat, and that was very traditional in this part of the world. Now, this type of roof building hadn't, there's no documented example of this after, I think, the mid-19th century. And the earliest documented example is, I think, the 16th century of bracken thatching. So we had to go out and cut all of this bracken as well, bunch it all up, bring it up, and then find a method for fastening it on. It was a fantastic experience, and exactly the sort of thing that I left archaeology to come and do, to be engaged in a craft process which has the most ephemeral archaeological signature. So yes, we sort of perfected our crafts, but there was also a desire to, well, I mean, we just, here I'm actually, we dug a medieval cesspit for real this time round, and of course Peter and I had a pretty good idea. We were, you know, the people we were with saying, well, there's no documentary reference for the sort of sizes of these things and everything, and I thought, no, wait a minute, where have I seen a medieval cesspit before? Of course, I've dug one, so so it was great to put theory into practice, and here, this is Peter's sort of modern take, if you like, on the medieval cesspit. A necessity, I have to say, up on top of the hill, more than a kilometre from the nearest facilities. But again, you know, it really was about these experiences that leave a very ephemeral archaeological record. And this ploughing with oxen is a craft which we know dates back to prehistory. And there were teams of oxen ploughing in Sussex, my home county, as late as the 1920s. So here we have a craft skill that dates back, you know, millennia. And I have this interest in Anglo-Saxon landscapes, but in obviously being interested in Anglo-Saxon landscapes, I have to pick out many of the earlier and later features of the landscape, and of course field systems have become one of my passions.